Hi everyone, good evening. We'll wait for 2 more minutes and then we'll start the session. Yeah? Okay, I'm gonna start. So today is the 8th week of our session, and today we are going to mostly talk about or ask questions about conservation. So, I'll start with the first question. Hmm. So, the first question is on your screen. You can read it and give me the answer. So Rehanu says B is the answer. What do the other people say? There are three more people over here. No, two more people over here. What do you say? Monica says B. Bharat, what is your answer? Bharat and Mahashweta, do you think you can answer this question? Okay, so it's an easy one. So there are these animals called pygmy hawks. Right now, currently their populations are only in Assam. Long back, they were found across the entire Terai arc that includes Uttarakhand, Bihar, and some parts of Uttar Pradesh. So Nepal. So now they are only left in Assam, and their numbers are as down as 250 or something. So scientists have started collecting them as individuals and started these breeding programs to basically enhance their population throughout the area. So you can see the answer to this question is there in the question itself. So conservationists are playing matchmakers, aided by cutting-edge genetic analysis, pairing up individuals in the world's sole pygmy hawk captive breeding program. So it's a captive breeding program. They capture the animal and then they help it in the breeding, help them breed. So ex situ conservation, as I suppose everyone knows, is basically conservation in its natural habitat, and in situ it's not in the natural habitat; it's somewhere else. But yeah. So in this case, it's the answer is B, in situ conservation, where they are bred not in the natural habitat but somewhere else in a zoo or an institute, and then released in the natural environment. So yeah, the answer is B, in situ conservation. I'll move on to the next question. Yeah. So Rehano says it's in situ conservation. What do the others think? So you must have realized how interesting this technique is. So basically, there's this Galapagos archipelago. Archipelago is like a group of islands, and so there have been these feral goats. Can someone tell me what feral means? Feral. Yeah. So like stray dogs are also called feral dogs. So basically they are wild, but they are not from that. So they are non-native to that region. So they become feral. Like there are feral camels in Australia. Yeah, Australia they have feral camels. Then there are feral pigeons. A lot of pigeons everywhere. They are all feral. So yeah, so likewise in Galapagos group of islands, they have some feral goats and they're having significant impacts of ecosystem there. Majority is basically they what happens is they feed all the the native species that are regenerating in the forest. So they chew on it and they finish it off, and then they also have competition with the native tortoise over there. So so all these feral goats are basically impossible to remove from an area as large as 500,000 hectares. Yeah, feral cats are also, yeah, very common. So thank you, Rehano. I mean, why is it impossible? So the impossibility is like, I mean, you can see a group of goats and then collect them and take them away in a helicopter. That's okay. I mean, if you have like hundreds of goats or something, you can do that. But once you get down to something like 10 or 20 in numbers, it's very difficult to then collect the goat and take them away, because finding 10 goats in a 500,000 hectares of land is quite difficult a task, and it is quite expensive as well. So it's basically the last bit of collection of feral goats that is quite expensive and quite impossible. And usually those 10-20 goats within a year or two they can breed, and they can have a higher population in no time. So So yeah, you cannot leave 10 to 20 goats and say that the conservation is done. So what they came up with this technique called Judas's goat, which has been applied elsewhere as well. So basically, I mean, Judas goat. The term comes from the biblical term. There was one person in Jesus's set of people, set of followers who betrayed him. So basically, Judas's goat is basically used in that way, like a betrayer of goat. So what they do is they radio collar that one particular goat and send them away in the forest. So now what happens is the goats, social biology, what it includes is they are very social animals. So they tend to be together. So this goat goes and meets up with other goats and so yeah, so basically it gives away the location of those goats. So once so like within 2 weeks or something, the helicopter just has to look at where the location of this particular radio collared goat is, and it goes to that area, picks up all the goats that it can find, and then comes back. So that way it's easier to collect all the goats from like all the goats invading into this archipelago. So that is the whole idea. So now people said that the answer is in situ conservation. So you have to see that there is no breeding program over here, or there's no capture. I mean, there is a capture, but that's for feral goat, which was not a part of the ecosystem. You understand? So feral goat was not a part of the ecosystem. It was a non-native. So that is being captured and removed. So basically, the same way in any restoration program, the invasive plants are removed. So that is not basically capturing the plant or capturing the animal. So even in lantanas, say for example, are removed from the area. So similarly, in those ways, animals are also removed. So this is capturing, but it is not a captive breeding program. And basically, in a captive breeding program, the captured animals are usually the threatened animals. So the goat is not a threatened animal over here. What is at threat is the Galapagos archipelago, the Galapagos Islands. So that is why this is more an ex situ conservation than an in situ conservation. So do you get the difference? Rehanul, you answered in situ, that's why. Others, did you get the, I mean, why the answer is ex situ and not in situ? Okay. Cool. Then I'll move on to the next question. Is everybody clear how the method was and why the answer is ex situ? I mean, Monica said yes. It would be nice if other people also say yes. All right, I will go to the next question. Yeah. Okay, Monica says A. Anybody else? Hanu says A. Jyotsna says A. Cool. Enough people have answered. Who's left? Anupam, your answer, and yeah, Anupam, your answer. What do you think the answer is? Okay, so basically, I'll move on to the next slide, which will explain a bit more about the question. So, based on IUCN, a red list of threatened species, this is how threatened species are basically categorized. Like, there must be certain ways in which the categorization happens, right? So, usually the categories are based on how much has the population declined and how many are still left. So these are the certain criteria that are used in categorizing the threat, the level of threat to the animal, to an animal or a plant. So as you can see, extinct are basically the last individual has died. So that was recently, I think, the white rhinoceros from Africa. I'm not sure which rhinoceros, but one of the rhinoceros that the last individual recently died. So that became extinct in that sense. Extinct and wild is when the animal is not found in the natural environment anymore. All the individual of that species are only found in zoos or menageries or some certain places. So basically, they are no longer left in their geographic range. Then the answer was critically endangered. Everybody's right. A is the answer, where 80% to more than 90% has the decline has happened in the previous 10 years. That is usually the 3 generations. So some animals like birds have a generation time of 2 years. That's basically generation time is from birth to when it starts breeding. So for humans, it's usually 20 years. For birds, it's usually 2 years. So the generation time is usually calculated in that way. So, for example, in 100 years, humans would have 5 generations. Although it doesn't seem like that, but that's how it is. So, 3 generations, and the current population size is fewer than 50 individuals. That's basically giving it a rank of critically endangered. And then endangered, vulnerable, near threatened come after that, where endangered is again 50 to 70% of the population decline has happened in 3 generations, and 250 or less of individuals are left. Vulnerable and near threatened are similarly have the same kind of this thing. Then there are 2 more: least concern, where the category basically it says that the animal is everywhere. Pervasive is basically spread everywhere, and data deficient is very tricky. Maybe the animal is threatened, maybe the animal is not threatened, but the only thing is there is no data to confirm. So that is another category, that most animals, most insects and reptiles are usually data deficient. So I hope things are clear. So the answer to this question is A, critically endangered. I'll move on to the next question. Yeah. Any answer from anyone? So the clue over here is the first line. Crosses between two genetically distinct group or population result in reduction of fitness. So, what is inbreeding depression? Can anyone explain? Or, I mean, need not explain, but what does it mean? Inbreeding depression. Okay. Okay, just answer me this question. Like in humans, you are not supposed to marry within your family. I mean, brothers cannot marry their sisters, cousins are not allowed to get married. So, why is that a case? Why do people not encourage that? I mean, why do people don't encourage that? Any answer would work. At least I should know. Yeah, Anupam is right over here. Similar DNA, not same DNA. I mean, unless until you are identical twins, you cannot expect them to have same DNA. But yeah, similar DNA. So I mean, your alleles. Yeah, basically everything would be so similar that you are not bringing a possibility of some differences, so that yeah, that whole crossover that happens in the gametes is not happen. I mean, it's not useful over here. So that's why, I mean, that crossover helps in the survival of the sexually reproducing organisms. So so that is not being useful in the case if they marry within a family. Similarly, in a population which is so small, it just so happens that if the population is so small, that most of them would be related to each other, and when they start breeding within each other, it gives rise to a reduction in fitness of the animal, and that is called inbreeding depression. So basically, inbreeding is breeding within the same population, or within the same family, or within relations. That is inbreeding depression. And what is the first line that says is crosses between two genetically distinct group or population result in reduction of fitness. So as inbreeding can cause a depression, so can outbreeding. So what does outbreeding say? That the animals from the two populations are so different, although the same species, but they are so different that when they breed together, they can produce offsprings that are invalid in certain ways. Like in this example, there was a ibex from Turkey and there was an ibex from Sinai. Sinai, I think, is in Egypt, but yeah, people can confirm that. But so basically, these two ibex, one is in temperate and one is mostly in tropical zone. So what happens is they have different periods of calving. What is calving? Basically, birthing calves. So when these when these ibexes have offsprings, so that period is called so when that happens, so that's very different. Like, I think there's a 6 months difference between these two species. The one is right before the winter, and yeah, and the other doesn't matter, because in tropical regions, they don't usually have very seasonal climate, so they can, I mean, they can have offsprings any time, and doesn't matter for them, because they can survive in a tropical climate. But it is very important for the ibex that lives in temperate zone, because if it doesn't calve before winters, then or if it calves during the winter time, then the mother goat wouldn't have enough milk. There is not enough food resources, so the calf won't be able to survive long. So that is what happened. So when these two populations were kept together, they started breeding and they started producing hybrid calves, and so they started producing calves at a time when it was the peak winter, so which was like an inappropriate time to have calves. So that's when the calves started dying in the wild, because of not enough resources, the mother not having enough milk, etc., etc. And that is why there was something called outbreeding depression. So the answer is outbreeding depression. Did you guys get what I was trying to tell you? Is everybody clear on this? Yeah. Okay. Sure, then I'll move on to the next question. Yeah. So I think sir has talked about population viability analysis, although very briefly, but yeah. So Rehanu says D. Anybody else with the answer? So PVA is basically population viability analysis, in case people are confused. Monica, Bharat Kumar, Jyotsana, and Anupam, Sheikh, do you have answers? Can you just guess something and nobody is stopping you from guessing? Okay, so population viability analysis is basically used to estimate the likelihood of a population's extinction and indicate the urgency of recovery effects. So based on different deterministic factors and stochastic factors, what people usually do is, okay, this is the population of this animal, and based on what you can expect in the future, this many years it would take for this population to decline if the amount of degradation of the habit or whatever, habitat fragmentation or over hunting, etc., etc., all the negative effects that on the population continues the same way. So that is what population viability analysis is. It will actually tell you the number of years required for that population to get extinct. So it has been done for several animals, particularly in America on grizzly bears and yeah, some lynx. So all these animals have been dealt with population viability analysis. But the problem over here is how accurately can it assess the extinction risk? That is a problem. So the solutions different people have come up is yeah, population viability analysis is a very good tool to tell you how much, basically tell you how urgent is the recovery effort, or how urgent is the conservation that should be happening with that population. But there are several things that has to be taken care. First is it should not be telling absolute numbers. It should not be telling like 120 years the population will get extinct. it should basically be telling it relatively. So right now I mean relative in the sense like it can tell you in generation time. Like I said, humans have a generation time of generation period of 20 years. Likewise, grizzly bears would have a generation period of, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years. So it could tell that like it will take 10 generation times for the animals to get extinct or something of that sort. Or projection should not be made for long time periods. It should not be making projections for 500 years. If you never know what happens in 500 years. There could be a tsunami. There could be a lot of things that happens. Like basically, it is to take into account stochastic events that cannot be predicted, right? I mean, deterministic events can be predicted, but stochastics cannot be predicted. Then simple models to be used rather than complicated. What do you mean by simple models? So basically, when you are predicting something, you are using a lot of variables. Say you are using temperature change, you're using vegetation, you're using forest decline, you're using variable like the animal's lifespan, etc., etc. So if you are using as many variables, then there are chances that your models will get weaker and weaker in helping predict the future of that animal. So basically, the model should be as simple as possible. It should use as minimum variable as possible rather than using complicated ones. So these are all the things to be taken care of when you are using a population viability analysis to predict the likelihood of a population's extinction. So the answer is D, all of the above. I hope you got it. I'm moving on to the next question. Yeah. Okay, Monica says B. Okay, I have to calculate myself. Okay, this is more a mathematical question. So, the sir did talk about patches, matrix, and basically landscape ecology in that sense. So he was talking about something called perimeter area ratio. So, I mean, as the name suggests, it's basically the ratio between the perimeter of the patch. The patch could be something very heterogeneous, like patch could be like a forest patch or a grassland patch, which has a very heterogeneous composition across the patch, and there's a discrete edge between the patch and the surroundings of it. So that's basically a patch. So the perimeter area ratio is basically a perimeter of the patch divided by the area of the patch. So when you have circular patch, so what is the perimeter area ratio in that sense? So that would be, can somebody tell me how do we calculate the perimeter of a circle if the radius is r? Sorry, I mean, this is a very high school kind of a question, but I think, I mean, I know people have learned it long back, but I think you should remember these things. Perimeter of a circle. Nobody? So perimeter of a circle is 2 pi r. People remember this? 2 pi r. Monica, that's the area of the circle, pi r square. I'm coming to that. Perimeter is 2 pi r. So basically, perimeter area ratio when the radius is r, then that becomes 2 pi r upon pi r square. So pi cancel, r square may r cancel, then that would the ratio becomes 2 by r. So when we compare two circular patches, one with the radius r, the other is 3 times the r, so that would be, the other is the radius 3r. So when we are comparing them, that means we are basically getting a ratio of that itself. So that would mean that 2 by r upon 2 by 3r. So if you do the mathematics, you'll find the answer is 3 times the second one. So the smaller circle would have a higher perimeter ratio, and the larger circle would have a lower perimeter ratio, or suppose. Yeah. So everybody clear? The answer is C, 3 times the second one. Yeah, it's a bit of a maths involved, but I think people who are studying ecology cannot forget the basic maths, and they have to brush up on these things. The next question is on your screen. Any answer? Okay, so explaining the graph over here, the x-axis is basically age in relative units. So what does this mean? So this means that all the animals have different lifespans. For example, humans have a lifespan of average lifespan of about 60, 70. Birds have an average lifespan about 7 to 10 years. Trees, on the other hand, have a lifespan can extend to about 1,000 years. So when we are comparing these lifespan, we cannot have x-axis in terms of years or centuries or something like that. We have to have them in a relative term. So that's why. So basically, when we in this. This is the beginning of the basically birth of the animal. Okay, here is the birth of the animal, and here is the death of the animal. So the age, the 0 to whatever this point is basically the lifespan of the animal. It doesn't matter how many years there are, but this is just giving you the lifespan of the animal, total lifespan of the average lifespan of the animal. So so in type 1 curve, what happens is you have type 1 curve, they say that it's basically a human has a type 1 curve, then a bird can have a type 2 curve, and a plant can have a type 3 curve. So in a type 1 curve, what happens is humans have babies. The babies are taken care for a very long time. So a human baby is taken care for 17 to 18 years before they are independent enough to produce their own kids. So that taking care takes a long time for a human. It's the same for elephants, it's the same for tigers, say for example. So they all have type 1 curve. So basically number of survivors. So what happens is, because of this intense care that is given in case of type 1 animals, the number of survivors, so the number of deaths in the infancy is not very high, and as the animals age, the number of deaths increases. Like at the very end of the lifespan of the animal or plant, the number of deaths increases. So you can see the curve immediately goes down at after a very long period in the lifespan. So that is a type 1 curve. So I hope you understood that. Then there's a type 3 curve which says that the number of offsprings are produced. Oh, also type 1 curve, because there's a lot of care involved in the initial stages of the animal, it becomes very practical to have less number of children. So a human woman, I mean, for example, cannot have more than 10 to 14 kids. I mean, that's also very high in that case. Usually humans have only 2 kids in a lifetime. So that's like you have very less number of kids. They are taken intense, I mean, they have intense care from the parents in the initial stage of their life till they are independent enough to have their own offsprings. On the other hand, there is these plants which have very high number of offsprings in terms of seeds. They have a lot of offsprings like that. So one tree can have 10,000 seeds, right? Like a tree of Lucina leucocephala can have 20,000 seeds in one generation, or sorry, in 1 year. So that's like a lot of offsprings, and not every one of them can reach adulthood. Most of them germinate, most of them become saplings, but in that process, like a majority of them are killed, and only like a handful of them survive. Like this can happen in sea turtles as well. A lot of eggs are laid by the sea turtles on the beach, but out of, like, the ratio is like I remember 1,000:1. So out of 1,000 eggs, only one adult survives to adulthood to breed again. So that's a very, very cruel kind of a ratio that is there for type 3 animals. This is the same for a lot of animals like rats. Over there also, that the number of offsprings are very high, but animals reaching a lifespan, I mean end of the lifespan, is very low. Number of animals reaching the end of the lifespan is very low. So you can see the curve drops at the initial phase of their lifespan itself. Type 1, the curve drops only after the end, I mean nearing the end of the lifespan. In type 3 curve, the drop in the number of animals is in the initial phase of the life. Then there is a type 2 curve which is in between, like birds. The drop isn't very apparent, and because of I mean, they have a mixture of both. They don't have high number of offsprings. Also, they have some intensity of care in the initial phase of their life. So they have something like this straight line where yeah, which is somewhat in between type 1 and type 3 curve. So what are K-selected species and R-selected species? K-selected species are the ones which are determined by the carrying capacity of the population, and R-selected species are the ones where the the number of offsprings are very high in the initial phases of the like number of offsprings produced are very high. So what do you think the type would be for a K-selected species, now that I've explained you what type 1, type 2, type 3 species are? A. Yes, Monica is right over there. So type 1 species are mostly K-selected species. For example, humans are a K-selected species, elephants are K-selected species, tigers are K-selected species. So all these charismatic species are mostly K-selected species. I hope you get the answer. Is everybody clear on this? We have 3 more questions, and yeah. Is it everybody clear? Yes or no? Yeah, if you have doubt, then you can go back and check what K selected and R selected species are. And you can also look at what type 1, type 2, type 3 kind of species are. Okay. This is the next question, 8th question. Rayhanu says C. Anybody else with any answer? Yeah. Monica says C, Jyotsna says C. So I think people have understood. So fragmentation of a forest patch. So there's, let me see if I have another slide for this. Okay. So fragmentation is basically one patch which is cut by a linear infrastructure. What is a linear infrastructure? Could be a road, could be a canal, could be a railway line. All of these are like straight lines cutting through patches. So a patch is like this. There is some area that is surrounding the patch that is called the edge. The edge has usually a very different kind of a species composition. Like the species in the edges are slightly different from what they are found, what the species would be in the interior of the forest or a grassland or whatever you're taking as a patch, right? So, and edges are usually because it is formed because of the interaction with the forest and the matrix or whatever is outside, whatever land use is outside the patch. So once you cut a road, what happens is that outside of the patch the road becomes a part of the outside. So the edge increases from the road to the inside of the patch. So that would mean that the edges basically increase along the diameter of the road length. So that what that means is there are some areas that has gone for the edges. So where is the area that is, how is the area decreasing? Where does the area decrease for? What does the area decrease for? And that is usually for the core area. So core area was intact initially. Now once the road goes, edges increases, and the core area is the area that gets affected and it reduces. So what happens is the species in the interior or the core of the patch decrease, and species on the edges of the patch increase. So yeah, answer is right, all of you. The answer was C. Cool. I'll move on to the next question. So Rehanu says D, Jyotsna says D. So we discussed what feral are. So feral are basically stray animals. So stray dogs near protected areas are a menace. Menace means are trouble because of a predation of wild herbivores and competition to wild carnivores. Yes, that's true. Dogs have been known to predate on herbivores like nilgais and deer. There are a lot of videos that go around. I mean, if you are even if you are a part of any such kind of a wildlife loving group, you would see a lot of videos like that where dogs are predating upon wild animals, wild herbivores mainly, and competition to wild carnivores. So basically, they'll chase away a leopard, a tiger. Although it's good for human settlement, but they are a competition to wild carnivores that way. Then producing hybrids with other wild canids. Wild canids are basically wolves and foxes, so they have been known to produce hybrids. They have been known to breed with these wolves because dogs are basically a descendant of wolf, is what is generally believed. So, and forming diet to certain wild carnivores like leopards feed leopards that live in and around human settlements feed a lot on wild dogs and wild pigs. So the dogs are a major part of the diet. So, but wild animals feeding on stray animals can impact their life in some way. So yeah, so basically feral dogs near the protected areas are a menace because all of the above reasons. So yeah, all of you are right that way. We'll go to the last question. Rehanu says Exitu. Rehanu, could you read the question again? Okay. So there's this medicine called diclofenac, which is a veterinary medicine that is given to sick and old cattle. I think it's a painkiller for the cattle. So they're given to them, and when these cattle die, most of the areas they don't bury the cattle; they just leave it in open areas, dead, like they're like large open grounds. I think it happens in Gujarat, Rajasthan, a lot of places where they leave the cattle. I mean, unlike other places where they become a part of the diet for humans, that is not happening in a lot of states in our country. So they leave it in the open ground. So what happens is these vultures feed on these dead bodies of the cattle, which has a high quantity of diclofenac. Now what happens is diclofenac is a poison of a kind for vultures, and during the 90s the number of vultures in the city of Delhi was immense. Like in the Delhi garbage area, like where the dumping ground usually had like vultures in thousands of numbers, and then suddenly when diclofenac was introduced in India, their numbers drastically reduced, and people have seen vultures drop down from the sky because of poisoning of diclofenac. So that was as bad as that. So then the numbers, I think, became 1/10 of what it was in the initial period, like in the 90s, 80s and 90s. So do you think it would be wise to have an ex-situ kind of a conservation for vultures when it is very, I mean, before the policies are implemented nationwide? Because taking diclofenac off the market, I mean, in a country as large as India, would be really, really difficult. So do you think Yeah, yeah, exactly. So ex-situ is the yeah. Perfect. Yeah, I mean Rahanul and Josena, you're right. I'm sorry, Rahanul. I confused myself. So ex-situ is the answer for this. That is taking the vultures out of their natural habitats, having breeding centers, and yeah, I mean, and that is happening in a lot of places, especially in Baksa Tiger Reserve. As far I mean, I've been to Baksa Tiger Reserve, where the vulture Haryana, yeah, vulture breeding programs are happening. So yeah, ex situ conservation program is a very good way for controlling the decline of vulture population right now. So after this nationwide ban happens, it has already happened, but I'm not sure how effective the ban is. People are still selling diclofenac. I think the diclofenac right now is used only for human consumption, not for the veterinary consumption. But I can be wrong. I'm not sure. But yeah, the answer is ex-situ A. So that will bring us to the end of the session today. Do you guys have any doubts or questions before we move on? All right. Okay then. I'll end the call then. Okay. Thank you. Bye.